everybody, and welcome back to the Just Make It Pretty podcast. Today's episode is called Personal Branding with Enthusiasm, and I have the most perfect guest. You are going to love him, and I can't wait to talk about how getting excited about your brand can really transform your confidence and also the direction of your company. So let's get into it. Welcome to the Just Make It Pretty podcast, the slightly unhinged marketing podcast for home builders and beyond. I'm your host, Sarah Haynes, also known as the Pixel Wizard, and my goal is to tackle the tough stuff that goes in behind the scenes in marketing and offer actionable tips, creative insights, and a little bit of humor to spark some creativity. I'm so glad you're here. Now let's get started. So today, the special guest is David Hagan, who is the founder of Sales Uncomplicated. And I'm just so thrilled to have this conversation, David. This is going to be a great time, and it's always so difficult to get on your schedule because you're so busy and successful. So I'm just so grateful for you being here.
Whatever. So when I say whatever, I mean about me being busy. I'm no busier than you are. But if you think I'm busy, that's cool. I always say that about my wife. If she thinks I'm busy, then mission accomplished. But Sarah, all kidding aside, it is an honor to be on the Just Make It Pretty podcast with you today. I'm honored that you would invite me. Because I hold you and Sherry and all that y'all do in such high regard that I really am bowled over by the invitation. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I could not think of anyone better to have this conversation because when we've worked together over the years, and I have just seen you and your brand just blossom and have so much excitement and it's so contagious. And I want to dig into that today because I feel like you have something really unique and I want to talk about it. So that's why we're here.
Well, you're very sweet. You're very kind. It is fitting that we're talking about this here on your podcast. And I say this with all sincerity. I'm not just saying this because you're here. With all sincerity, my brand is what it is in large part because of you. I knew when I opened my company 3.5 years ago, Sales Uncomplicated, that brand was going to be important. I didn't realize that it would be as important. I didn't realize it would be as personal or as meaningful. When you talk about having enthusiasm about your brand, I think I have enthusiasm about the brand because of how personal you made my brand. And so, yeah, I'd love to unpack that, but I also have to give credit where credit is due. If I'm a worthy guest on your podcast, it's only because of you and what you did for me. So I am grateful for you and Sherry and just the concerted effort that y'all bring really to everything.
Oh, thank you. It was a pleasure and so much fun creating that brand for you. But I really feel and it goes against my whole podcast theme, but I am just making the pretty parts of the brand, right? And the person that, is behind it is the one that actually makes the energy and makes it successful. And I'm just excited that it has gone well for you. So that's the best case scenario for me is that you are happy.
Yeah.
And so I want to talk about you come to everything with so much energy and so much just excitement. Like I said, I'm probably going to say that word like a million times today, but where do you think that just that energy comes from and how do you funnel it into your brand?
Yeah, it's very interesting. When I was 7 or 8, maybe even younger, maybe 6, they called energy hyperactivity and wanted to medicate me. And I probably was medicated for a little while. I don't know. I wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning with just ready to go. I really do. I don't, you're very kind to talk about anything that you say complimentary is, I don't know that I deserve any of it. I'm grateful for you. And you're such an encouragement to me, Sarah. I don't know. I can't really take credit for being energetic, except for something that my dad said to me. My dad raised me and my 2 brothers as a single parent for most of our life. And he's just my hero. And I think so much about the things that he taught me. But early on, a lot of things he taught us were in some ways very cliche. But I didn't know they were cliche because I heard them from him. And probably in my teenage years, probably quoted him on a lot of things that had been said by other people. For instance, I can remember my dad telling me one that, as an early a young child at an early age, my dad telling me that me and my brothers that we could be anything we wanted to be. And I also remember him telling me that if, and my brothers, that if we would work from our passion, we would never go to work a day in our life. That sounded great to me. As a young kid, it wasn't really even about the passion. It was about not going to work. Like I didn't understand, like I took him literal, right? If you work
Yeah.
from your passion, you'll never go to work a day in your life. So when that was burned into my memory, it was burned in my memory because, ooh, I don't want to go to work. But then as I became older and realized really the meaning behind that statement and that truth, I realized that there's something to be said about doing things that you're passionate about. And I've been blessed most of my adult life. I've been able to plug into the areas where I'm passionate, and that makes it more fun. Sarah, I've jokingly said that I'm going to write a book called Why You Should Jackpot Proof Your Life. And what I mean by being jackpot proof, Rebecca and I will play the lottery like once every couple of years, only when it's worth it, like only when it's worth $300 million. I laugh that we're not going to waste $2 on a paltry $50 million lottery. But when it's worth $250 million, then we'll get in. And really, we'll spend $10 on tickets. And the $10, really, we've always joked, if we get our $10 back, because we'll go to dinner somewhere, usually the night of the lottery or when we bought tickets, which is usually the night of the drawing, we'll go to dinner and we'll spend an hour at dinner. The conversation that night will be about all the things that we're going to do if we win the jackpot, right?
Yeah.
And so I started Sales Uncomplicated February 1st, 2022. And so it was in that year, I don't know, 6 months after I started, it was one of those, we were playing the lottery and we were talking about what we were going to do if we won the jackpot. And Rebecca asked me if I would quit my job. It's the first time anybody had asked me that once I started my own company. When I started my company at age 50, it was the first time I've ever worked for myself. I've never worked for myself at any point in my life until then. And so it's the first time I'd ever had this question about, hey, would you quit your job if you won the lottery? And I didn't even really have to think about it. I told her I wouldn't. And she looked at me. She like on one hand, she didn't believe me. She said, you really wouldn't quit. You wouldn't quit doing what you're doing if you won the lottery, if you won $500 million. And I said, maybe I wouldn't. It might look, what I do might look a little different. I might not work 5 days a week. I might not travel a commercial airline, but if I know my heart, I wouldn't quit my job. And I told her a few weeks after that, I said, we're blessed when we can have a jackpot proof life. And she asked me, like, what are you talking about? What does that mean? And I said, well, just a phrase that I coined after thinking about that night when we were talking about the lottery. And I told you I wouldn't quit my job if I won the lottery. Can we get the kind of life that wouldn't change if we won the jackpot? If we won some kind of jackpot, any kind of jackpot, are we doing what we love so much that if some huge sum of money or some other big winnings came into the picture, we wouldn't change what we're doing? And so anyway, that's just, and so I think that's why, and that's a long answer to a short question, so I apologize, but I think that's where, if I'm bringing energy, that's where I'm bringing energy. That's why I'm able to bring energy, because I really am doing what I love to do. I really am.
That's incredible. No, that's a better answer than I even anticipated, because I think that's the core of why it is so important to you. And I can, every time that I hear a little bit more about your story, or like when we're working together, like I feel like you share little bits of these like personal memories and like things that have happened to you in the past. And that's a big theme in everything that kind of you do. And I think that was something else that we really worked on in your personal brand.
Yeah.
And I'd love if you can talk about that. Like, how do you pull those inspirations so smoothly and it just flows together and makes this like great story?
Yeah. From a brand standpoint, it wasn't like that until you and Sherry entered the picture. So when I started my company, so for those that are listening to this podcast who maybe like me, you probably, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're doing your own thing, you probably have a limited budget. Heck, you could have a 20-year company with multi-million dollar in revenue and still be on a limited budget. We all are. But my budget was so limited. I went from a W-2 job to work, wasn't even 1099. I didn't have any, well, I didn't have anything for anything.
Yeah.
If anything, it would be my CD. I was working for my savings. But so my logo was something I created. I went literally, I'm ashamed to say this, Sarah. I went to back in late 2021 when we were preparing everything. I went to a create your own logo site and spent a couple $100 and created a logo, which was a dome logo. Didn't really have a lot to do with it. I was trying to play on the sun. The first three letters of sales and uncomplicated were sun, SUN. And I thought, oh, the sun gives light and the sun helps us to grow. So if you want to grow, it was dumb. Everybody felt that sun was like a crown of thorns. They were like, is this about Jesus and the crucifixion? No, not that I'm ashamed of my faith, but no, it's not supposed to be. It was a terrible logo. And even the font, like everything I did, a website, you remember, gosh, you know better than anybody, the website that I did, one of those $200, whatever, create your own website. And so the brand didn't really have anything to do with me. It was just, I knew I needed a website to point people to, and I felt like I needed some kind of logo. And Sherry Morton, God bless that woman, she was selfish. So I always, the first few months, I thought, she's so amazing. And then I thought, she's so selfish. And I can only say that, Sarah, because I love her to death. Yeah, I really do. Like, she's just, you and her both are just two of the most precious people to me in the world. So Sherry and I and Greg Bray from Blue Tangerine had decided to submit for a presentation for the International Builder Show in 2023. And we did that, I think it was 2023. We did that we did the proposal in early 2022. And Sherry said to me, David, we'd like to help you with your logo. And Sarah, the day that she talked to me, I could tell that she was trying to say something to me that she didn't know how to say. She was like tiptoeing. If you can imagine, those that know Sherry Morton and your partner at Share Drive, she was like tiptoeing. And I'm like, what are you, just come out. Like, you're trying to tell me, just tell me, David, your logo sucks and your website sucks. She probably didn't say it exactly that way, Sarah, but that's the way I heard it.
Yeah.
And
She might have said it that way.
It sucks. And can we help you? And she was so generous in just the way she presented your help, both of you, and your time, and you were as well. And when we agreed in late 2022, I guess it was, to revamp the website, the branding, the logo, everything, I'd love to tell your audience that the brand that we have now was all my idea, and that it was even intentional on my part. All the intentionality was, and I'm happy to talk about this in more detail, but all the intentionality in the brand, though it's tied to me and my story, and I think that's so important, but the intentionality came from you, like you and Sherry, like those conversations. And I think there were even some other people that were on some phone calls with y'all. I feel, again, we can talk about that. I want to answer your question, and I know I'm giving you long answers, but I'm passionate about the brand. I really am. And I'm more passionate about the brand now than I was even then, and more passionate about the brand than I ever really thought I would be. I knew that having a brand was important. And I also know that something that important should have some significance. I think authenticity is a buzzword that we just throw around. And sometimes that has become cliche, but I think people are looking for authenticity. I think in this day and age of artificial intelligence, that there's a place for that which is artificial, but it just makes that which is authentic that much more important. So authentic intelligence and authentic emotional intelligence is as important today as it's ever been, because there is so much artificial intelligence. And I did have this awareness that the brand, anything that we put out there, should be uniquely and wonderfully us as an individual and as a company. But again, the intentionality came from y'all.
Thank you. I think that anytime that you're going through a branding process and you're working with a designer, I feel like it's important to share those personal aspects of you. It's also important to share like your vision for your company and where you're wanting to go and what your process is and what you're actually doing in this company, because there's so many things you can take inspiration from. And a really good designer is going to like pull those elements in and give
Yeah.
me like, what's the secret sauce of your business? And let's put that somehow into this brand.
Yeah.
And so it's a lot more than just typing out your business name and there you go. So I think that's the part you're weaving in like your professional processes and who you are as a business, but also who you
Right.
are as a person.
Right.
And so I think what you've done is you've taken that like those words written out, but you've actually made it like a part of your whole program. And
Yeah.
I've seen you speak and I've seen some of the things that you do, but it's like the brand is not just a picture, it's not just your name, it's so much more. So
Oh,
I'd love to hear how
yeah.
that, like having that logo changed that whole experience for you.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And again, and I hope this comes off as sincere as it is when I keep saying this is because of what y'all did. So when we talked about, okay, we're gonna do the branding. If I remember, this was 3 years ago, Sarah. I remember that's where you and I met. So Sherry said,
Mhm.
okay, we're gonna do this branding. I want you to meet Sarah Haynes. And yeah, and again, I think there were a couple other people that were working with you at the time or working for you. But I remember, so I remember we said, okay, before we do the website, let's get the brand, let's get the colors, let's
Mhm.
get whatever font, whatever images, if any, let's do that. And so that was unique because we started out with some interviews and y'all interviewed me. And I think there were multiple interviews. I know there were multiple interviews. Sometimes I think it was you and maybe others, maybe it was just you, sometimes you and Sherry. But there were several interviews where I talked about where you asked me those questions, like talk a little bit about you, talk about what you do, what your business does, what Sales Uncomplicated is all about, what's important to you. And it was amazing because I remember on the front end of that thinking, okay, what's going to be the logo for a sales trainer? My business, for those that don't know, maybe probably most don't, I work in sales training, specifically in the home building space. So I work with home builders, although have worked in mortgages and some of the other ancillary industries to home building. Primarily, I work in the home building space and I do sales training and coaching and consulting. And early on, when I'm thinking about images, I'm thinking, what are we going to do? A picture of a book or a what would that look like?
Yeah.
So there were these, as I remember them, a few interviews, a few consultations, and then there was a concept meeting. And I remember I like the color blue, and I remember you making a comment about, oh my gosh, not another blue logo, really. And I laughed and said something like, we can do any color, but I just always have heard that blue is a color that, of trust. A lot of banks and will use different blues. And blue's my favorite color. I just bought a new car that's blue. I love blue. And so y'all came to that concept meeting that we all jumped on like a Zoom call this day. And one of the first things that I saw was an image of a paper airplane. And I remember thinking, like, what does that have to do with anything? And I think it was you, Sarah, that said, David, one of the things that we got from talking to you is that you're just a big kid at heart. That's a nice way of saying I stopped maturing somewhere around the age of 8. I'm an 8-year-old boy stuck in an old fat man's body. So the paper airplane you said honors your kind of your playfulness, and it just shows that the Easter egg, I guess, I'm paraphrasing. That was so long ago, I don't remember the exact quote. But the paper airplane is just, it symbolizes that you're a kid at heart. And then, it may have been Sherry Morton who said, and when you think about it, the paper airplane is really the most uncomplicated thing you can make. Certainly the most uncomplicated toy you can make. And I thought, oh, I like that because to me, when I was thinking about my company name, and I had that down before I met y'all, when I was thinking about my company name, I liked the idea of this. I wanted to come to market with this idea that where we're different is we really want to make sales training not complicated. And we thought about words like simple. I'm from South Georgia. The word simple is not a compliment in South Georgia. If somebody says you're simple, that's not a good thing. So
Mm.
simple's out. And I didn't want easy because I'd heard somebody say years ago that you always want to make sure as a sales trainer that you're not helping people or giving people the idea that there's an easy way or that they can take the easy way out. So I landed on, I want it to be uncomplicated because I don't want it's not easy and it's not simple, but it doesn't have to be complicated. And so I love the idea that this paper airplane could symbolize, hey, we're going to have fun with what we do. We're going to be playful. We're going to embrace our childhood and have fun. I actually do an exercise when I do sales training where we will fly a paper airplane. I love the paper airplane. Has become so much a, an incredible big part of who I am and what we do, because it is playful, it's fun, and it's uncomplicated. And so the way these meetings were going early on, there was something that was said, okay, here's where we see the logo in one way, where the word sales and the word uncomplicated are stacked and they're spelled out horizontally. And I think, Sarah, it was you that said, but we need a round version. And so one of the things I tell people in my training, my dad passed away the year I started my company. My dad raised me as a single parent. My mom left when I was 8. My dad raised me and my twin brother and our older brother, who was 2 years older. So he had this 10-year-old boy and these 2 8-year-old twins, and single-handedly raised us, never remarried, and just is everything to me. Other besides my wife and our children and now grandchildren, there's nobody on this earth that means anything to me like my dad does and did. And so he passed away, and we were doing this work right after my dad died. He died unexpectedly in September of 2022. And my dad was in the Navy. All of his brothers were in the Navy. And in fact, my older brother was in the Navy. But when I was a little kid, we didn't have internet. I can remember spending time with my dad going through copies of the Encyclopedia Britannica. We had the whole set. And he would show me things about the Navy, about aircraft carriers. He served on an aircraft carrier for 4 years. And I was fascinated from about the age of 6 with a fighter pilot, wanted to be a fighter pilot long before I ever saw the movie Top Gun. And I was fascinated with the patches that fighter pilots wear on their bomber jackets. And my dad, we would go through the encyclopedia, and he would tell me what those different patches mean, because they all have meaning. All of those insignias in the Navy and in the other branches have very significant meanings. And so I've always loved patches, those Navy patches. And so this might seem silly to some, but that morning that you brought up that airplane in the round logo, and there was this border around it, and I remember saying to you, Sarah, that looks like a patch from a bomber jacket. You probably thought I was crazy. I probably got a little emotional. I was like, that's incredible that we can take something that's playful and signify something that's uncomplicated. But to me, it just meant something, because it looked like those old Navy patches that, that I would, when I was a kid, I had some of them, I collected them. And so for me, that was it. Like, I loved that. I love that. And I told you, I love that. I think that might have even been the airplane came from one concept, and then the Sales Uncomplicated being in the round. And as I remember it, either you came back to it, or I think in that meeting you put them together. And that's when I was like, oh my God, that's a patch. And by the way, I reached out to the person that does like my merchandising, and a month later, and I've told you this, I think, but I wanted a patch. I'm like, I want this logo in a 4-inch patch that I could put on a bomber jacket. And I had to order like this crazy number.
Yeah.
It was like 27 patches or something, because they went by inches. So it was like a 3-inch patch. So I had to order 27 3-inch patches. And the next time I went and trained after they came in, I think I took a couple of them and just put them away. But I took the rest of them, like I was grabbing pins and koozies and things that I had with my logo on them. I took those patches. And at some point I told the story of my brand and of these meetings. And I said, you know what? I brought some of those patches if anybody wants them. And Sarah, I just set them on the table. And I was handing out things, pins and koozies and stuff. If people would give the answer, I'd give them a koozie or whatever. And I laid those patches down because I really did. I thought nobody's going to want those. And I looked up, and just a few minutes later, after telling the story about my dad and telling the story about you and the logo and the work that you and Sherry did, those patches were gone. I now order those patches 500 at the time. And when I take them places, they're always gone. So again, it's just part of this logo and this branding just being part of my story. Real quick, one other thing, and this is an even longer answer to a short question. You showed me the logo that's my main logo, and you said, so we're using the word sales in all capital letters because we know, David, that you take sales very seriously. And I thought, ooh, that's okay. Don't know if they're just stroking my ego, but I love it. Whatever. And then you said uncomplicated was uppercase, lowercase. And I remember, and it was a different concept, but I remember just like freezing. And in one of those meetings, I told you or somebody, I was talking about my dad, and because he had just passed away. And of course, I talk about him all the time. I've talked about him my whole life. I tell stories about my dad. And so then I'd feel bad because I'd cry after he passed away. I'd get so emotional in telling you stories. But then I'm like, I can't stop talking about him just because it's hard. And so I told you, I think, at some point in one of these interviews about my dad when I was a kid, my dad would leave us notes. Like when we would come home, because he was just a single parent, he would still be working 2 or 3 hours after we got home from school. He would leave money hidden in a drawer, but he'd leave a note out that tell us where the money was, but he wouldn't just tell us. He'd make us find it, and he would leave the note in Morse code. My dad was a radioman on the aircraft carrier, the Shangri-La, the USS Shangri-La in the 1960s. And he knew Morse code. And he would, when we were kids, he would say that it's just dots and dashes. And it was the dot, when it would come across that telegraph, the dots and dashes just, it would sound like da 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 da. And he would say things to us, and we didn't know. He could be making it up. None of us knew Morse code, but we learned the letters. So Morse code, there's only 26 letters. And so there's 26 combinations of dots and dashes. And then there are the digits 0 through 9. And so there are 36 combinations. There are thousands of combinations of dots and dashes, but only 36 of them mean anything in the English language. And so you were showing me this particular logo that is my Sales Uncomplicated logo. And I tell this story too when I'm out training, just because it's part of my story. So when I train around sales training, I want salespeople to understand that the buyer who's walking in their door has a story. And as important as their builder story is, as important as their brand story is, their buyer story is more important. And so I'll spend a half a day of a 2 day seminar. So I'll spend 25% of my training time talking about how important it is to know your story, salesperson. And to those that are listening, Sarah, if I may, how important it is for you to know your story and your why, and how important that why is to you. Even when it gets lost and we get detached from it, it really is ultimately the reason we're doing everything. The reason that's so important to me is because when I'm conscious and conscientious about my story and my why, then it helps me to remember that the next stranger who walks in the door of my sales center also has a story and a why. And it's not just about, ooh, let me understand your story. It's about, if I can understand your story, I have a better opportunity to understand your why. And if I can understand your why, I'll either know that I can help you or can't help you. And if I can help you, I'm helping you because of your why, not because some superficial. In our business, it's square footage and bedroom count and bathroom count. That doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
And so I told the story to you about my dad. Y'all wanted you, I thought it was so incredible. And this is why I brag on y'all so much, because you wanted to know my story before we even got into branding. And so that's why the brand is so important. The reason I'm so excited about it, enthusiastic about it, because it is wonderfully, even though it's my company, there's so many things about me that are just interwoven into our brand and our brand recognition. And so, just real quick, I saw the Sales Uncomplicated. Sales is capital letters, uncomplicated is uppercase, lowercase. And I remember asking, I think it was again you, over the uncomplicated, there's like some broken lines, like and I'm not looking at my logo right now, but where the L comes up, and then there's an I with a dot over the I, and then where the T, and then between the T and the D, there's like these lines over the word uncomplicated. And I remember getting choked up. That year I'd struggled with going to speak right after my dad passed away. I went and spoke at a couple national conferences. I didn't want to. But the first one I did was with Roland Nancy down in Clearwater, Florida. And I'd been planning for months to talk about the power of why, and the whole premise of what I was just talking about, how important your why is, how important your why is everything, because it'll help you remember the customer's why, because their why really is everything. And so we were talking about this logo, and I liked the Sales Uncomplicated horizontal version And I remember just stopping and I said, so what is this? What are these ashes in this dot? And then somebody on the call said, oh, there's a line under uncomplicated that's unbroken, but the line over uncomplicated just happens to be how it got broken up. And I said, no, but what does it mean? And I remember as I remember, 3 or 4 people on this Zoom call, and I said, that's Morse code. And Sarah, you started Googling Morse code. Somebody said, is that a letter? Because it is dash. And I said, yeah, it's a letter. And you started Googling it and you found it. And as soon as you found it, I don't remember if you said it out loud first or I said it out loud. I said, that's the letter Y. And that may not mean anything to anybody else. And I'm not one of those people that when somebody passes, I'm looking for signs everywhere. I'm not superstitious. I believe in eternity. I believe my dad's more alive now than even I am. But there was just this incredible, I don't know, this incredible peace that came over me when I saw that logo. And I saw that even though it was unintentional on your part in graphic design, in my logo, there's Morse code that spells out the letter Y. There could have been a million combinations on that logo that wouldn't have meant anything. It just so happened that of the 26 letters, that configuration was one of the letters, and the letter that it happened to be is the letter Y. And I know that's not the word Y, but it was just a great reminder to me that, hey, you got to keep talking to people about their why. Anyway, I'm doing all the talking. I'm getting emotional, but my brand means so much to me because my story meant so much to you. And it is easy to get excited about the brand, but it's because you were very intentional in designing something that had meaning. And for that, I'm grateful to you and will be forever.
Oh, you're so sweet. This really was not an ad for how amazing Sarah is, but
Mm,
I think that your story is very powerful, and I have seen you get emotional talking about it, and I think that also just shows how real it is and how authentic it really is. And I think it's something that a lot of people struggle to find what that story is. Like, what is their why,
yeah,
and how do I incorporate that into what I'm doing? And it's funny because like even designers, we do this for people, right?
yeah,
We're creating this for our clients. And then when it comes to us, we're like, I have no clue. I don't know. So we can't even
yeah.
design for our own self. So it's something that like is just a universal thing. So being able to express it and communicate that is something that is rare, but it also makes your brand so much more powerful and so much more effective. So I
Wow.
would love to
Thank
hear
you.
as we're wrapping up. I don't want to keep you all day, but I want to give you a chance to say, what would you say to someone who's building a brand or trying to find that thing and they want to feel proud of their company, their personal brand, whatever it is?
Yeah,
What kind of advice would you give them?
yeah. That's an incredible question. I think now having been down this journey, I might have some insight, but only because of having somebody that was very intentional and really good at what they do. And so what I would do, I think I know some of the mistakes I made is I tried to separate my brand from myself. Even in social media marketing, I have a social media coach now who ironically is a personal brand coach who shared, that there's so much about you. You think about even large companies like Apple, even though Steve Jobs is no longer there, you can't separate Steve Jobs from Apple or Apple from Steve Jobs. Or think about Walmart or Chick-fil-A and Truett Cathy, Sam Walton with Walmart, or so many of these people, they are inextricably linked to their brand. So to think about that, and if you're thinking about your brand, I would say, if just because of what I tried to do, I tried to think about something that was corporate and maybe even something that was detached from me. And I think that was the opposite of what I should have been doing. So I would say, if you're thinking about branding, stop thinking about branding and spend some time. I'm old school, Sarah, because I'm old. take pen and paper and just write out some things about who you are. Just don't think about your brand. Don't think about what you're trying to create. Just, I would say, start with writing some things down about who you are. What are your passions? What's your why? Who are you? And I think it's easy when we start writing out some things who we're not. Sometimes it's hard to say, who am I? I don't know. Who am I not? I'm not unethical. I'm not pushy. I'm not high pressure. I'm not in your face. I'm not whatever. I'm not corporate. I'm not. Sometimes we can find out, we can characterize who we are or quantify even who we are if we start with who we're not. So I would say, if I have any advice to give, it would be to turn everything off, turn off all the noise, get in a place and in a time where there's no noise, and spend 20 minutes or 30 minutes or an hour or 2 hours and just begin to write out words that describe you and who you are, what your passion is. And even think about the people in your life and what they mean to you and who they are and what you identify with in them. And that could be your children or grandchildren. That could be your parents or grandparents or best friends, whatever, mentors, teachers, professors, business partners, whatever. And then begin to just bake on those words and think about what, what means the most. And then the imagery, I think, Sarah, and I'm not a graphic designer, but I think the imagery will, and then if it gets, I would tell you, this isn't a DIY thing. To me, I tried it. But if you get somebody to help you, go armed with those words, that story. And if you are in a situation where you're doing it yourself, that's where I'd start, is who are you? And start from that and because when the brand, the imagery, the colors, when all the elements of your brand mean something to you, it will begin to mean something to other people as they find out about you. But in my opinion, if the brand doesn't mean anything to you, in my opinion, it's gonna mean less to other people. It might become an identifying mark like Nike or the Coca-Cola swirl or the Apple. But in my opinion, it won't be anything more than just an identifiable mark. But when you are able to build something from a place of meaning and significance, it'll be hard not to be enthusiastic about that mark.
Absolutely. And you can then you're magnetized then to other people who share those same values and those same thoughts. And so now your ideal customer is right there. So you're building your entire brand, your personas, all of it through that process. And it's easier to think about, okay, so these are important to me. What's important to my target customer? There we go. They're aligned.
Yeah. Yeah. Because think about this, and I'm a word nerd. The English word, I like you, and the English word alike, because we're alike, because we like the same things, they mean the same thing. I like you. I same you because we're the same. I like you because you're like me. There's something about that when we're building rapport with people to look for those things that we have in common. What's interesting is when we talk about our brand, some of the people that will come and take those patches off the table will come to me in tears and say, hey, my dad, retired from the Air Force, or my mom I had somebody who came to me not long ago and said their dad was lost in service. And that the patches meant so much. Anyway, I'm sorry. But so yeah, it's just anyway, the brand, I think when we start from a place of this is something that's important to me, so this is what I want to do, then it's easy then to tell. And for a lot of people, it may not mean anything to them. But if it's just something that we grab, if we just grab, oh, I like this imagery, oh, I like this color, oh, I like this word, I like this phrase. If we just put some things together, not to take anything away from anybody else's, but if there is no significance in it, then it probably is never going to be significant. But if there is if we start from a place of significance, then there are people who will identify with that significance.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you sharing so vulnerably, and I know our listeners will as well. This is something that a lot of people talk about, but I think that you have a really unique perspective on it. So thank you for sharing that today. I want to give everybody that wants to reach out to you, how can they do that? Where can they go? And what's the easiest way?
Yeah, you're very sweet. Thank you so much. And gosh, you're so kind. So yeah, you can find me at salesuncomplicated.com, Sales Uncomplicated. And I'm David Hagan. You can find me on all the socials. Is that what the kids say these days? On the socials, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Sales Uncomplicated, or David M. Hagan is my handle. But just my website, and I'll tell you this, Sarah, and this is still true. I hope that this is never not a thing. If you go to my website, salesuncomplicated.com, and go to the About page, not only will you find my email address, you'll find my one and only cell phone number. I don't have a work cell phone and a personal cell. I just have one cell phone, and I put my number out there so people can call me. And if there's anybody listening that, if I could serve you, I would be honored to serve you in any way.
Amazing. And you have a podcast as well. Where can they find your podcast?
Yeah, it's not that complicated. And so you can find it anywhere you get your podcast, all the socials, all the places. So we actually have a social page for It's Not That Complicated, and you can find that on our website and any of the places that you get your podcast. You can find it. Again, that's called It's Not That Complicated. So thank you, Sarah, for mentioning that as well.
Yes, it's a great name. I love listening to your podcast.
Oh, you're very sweet. That was a play on Sales Uncomplicated, and it's so broad we can talk about anything, because the whole It's Not That Complicated really kind of applies to anything. So just making things accessible to people and breaking things down. I'd love to bring people on like yourself to just talk about how to do things that some people don't even know where to start. And it's incredible to hear experts break things down. I learn something every time I do an interview on that podcast.
Yeah, that's the fun part of podcasts. I learn every time I do an episode too.
Yeah.
So thank
Very
you.
cool.
Thank you again. We're going to wrap it up for today, but everyone go reach out to David Hagan and come back here next week. We'll have a new episode, a new guest, and thank you so much for spending your time with us. I hope you enjoyed. Have a great rest of your day.